So, I'm probably just going to stick with Lumpur Cha this morning and read some excerpts from collected teachings. So I'll just stop after each reading, and if anybody has any questions. And these are all on the theme of sense objects. So this is from Opening the Dhamma Eye, Collected Teachings, page 686. So as the Buddha expounded the Dhamma, Ajahn Cunda opened the eye of Dhamma. This eye is just the one who knows clearly. It sees things differently. It sees this very nature. Seeing nature clearly, clinging is uprooted, and the one who knows is born. Previously he knew, but he still had clinging. You could say that he knew the Dhamma, but he still hadn't seen it. Or he had seen the Dhamma, but still wasn't one with it. At this time the Buddha said, Cunda knows. What did he know? He knew nature. Usually we get lost in nature, as with this body of ours. Earth, water, fire, and wind come together to make this body. It's an aspect of nature, a material object we can see with the eye. It exists depending on food, growing and changing until finally it reaches extinction. Coming inwards, that which watches over the body is consciousness, just this one who knows, this single awareness. If it receives through the eye, it's called seeing. If it receives through the ear, it's called hearing. Through the nose, it's called smelling. Through the tongue, tasting. Through the body, touching. And through the mind, thinking. This consciousness is just one, but when it functions at different places, we call it different things. Through the eye, we call it one thing. Through the ear, we call it another. But whether it functions at the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind, it's just one awareness. Following the scriptures, we call it the 6 consciousnesses, but in reality, there is only one consciousness, arising at these 6 different bases. There are 6 doors, but a single awareness, which is this very mind. This mind is capable of knowing the truth of nature. If the mind still has obstructions, then we say it knows through ignorance. It knows wrongly and it sees wrongly. Knowing wrongly and seeing wrongly, or knowing and seeing rightly, is just a single awareness. We call it wrong view and right view, but it's just one thing. Right and wrong both arise from this one place. When there is wrong knowledge, we say that ignorance conceals the truth. When there is wrong knowledge, then there is wrong view, wrong intention, wrong action, wrong livelihood. Everything is wrong. And on the other hand, the path of right practice is born in the same place. When there is right, then the wrong disappears. Okay. After many years had passed, Lumpur is talking about his practice now, I was forced by the natural progression of events to change my ways. Having been ordained for some time, I ended up with more and more disciples, more people seeking me out. Living and practicing in the forest was something that attracted people to come and pay respects, as opposed to his wandering that he was doing. So as the number of followers increased, I was forced to start facing things. I couldn't run away anymore. My ears had to hear sounds, my eyes to see. And it was then, as an Ajahn, that I started gaining more knowledge. It led to a lot of wisdom and a lot of letting go. There was a lot of everything going on, and I learned not to grasp and hold on, but to keep letting go. It made me a lot more skillful than before. When some suffering came about, it was okay. I didn't add on to it by trying to escape it. Previously in my meditation, I had only desired tranquility. I thought that the external environment was useful insofar as it could be a cause to help me attain tranquility. I didn't think that having right view could be the cause for realizing tranquility. I've often said that there are two kinds of tranquility. The wise have divided it into peace through wisdom and peace through samatha. In peace through samatha, the eye has to be far from sights, the ear far from sounds, the nose far from smells, and so on. Then, not hearing, not knowing, and so forth, one can become tranquil. This kind of peacefulness is good in its way. Is it of value? Yes, it is. But it is not supreme. It is short-lived. It doesn't have a reliable foundation. When the senses meet objects that are displeasing, the mind changes because it doesn't want those things to be present. So the mind always has to struggle with these objects, and no wisdom is born. Since the person always feels that he is not at peace because of those external factors. On the other hand, if you determine not to run away but to look directly at things, you come to realize that lack of tranquility is not due to external objects or situations, but only happens because of wrong understanding. I often teach my disciples about this. I tell them, when you are intently devoted to finding tranquility in your meditation, you can seek out the quietest, most remote place, where you won't meet with sights or sounds, where there is nothing going on that will disturb you. There the mind can settle down and become calm because there is nothing to provoke it. Then, when you experience this, examine it to see how much strength it has. When you come out of that place and start experiencing sense contact, notice how you become pleased and displeased, gladdened and dejected, and how the mind becomes disturbed. Then you will understand that this kind of tranquility is not genuine. Whatever occurs in your field of experience is merely what it is. When something pleases us, we decide that it is good, and when something displeases us, we say it isn't good. That is only our own discriminating minds, giving meaning to external objects. When we understand this, then we have a basis for investigating these things and seeing them as they really are. When there is tranquility in meditation, it's not necessary to do a lot of thinking. This sensitivity has a certain knowing quality that is born of the tranquil mind. This isn't thinking, it's Dhamma Vichaya, the factor of investigating Dhamma. This sort of tranquility does not get disturbed by experience and sense contact. But then there is the question, if it is tranquility, why is there still something going on? There is something happening within tranquility. It's not something happening in the ordinary afflicted way, where we make more out of it than it really is. When something happens within tranquility, the mind knows it extremely clearly. Wisdom is born there, and the mind contemplates ever more clearly. We see the way that things actually happen. When we know the truth of them, then tranquility becomes all-inclusive. When the eye sees forms or the ear hears sounds, we recognize them for what they are. In this latter form of tranquility, when the eye sees forms, the mind is peaceful. When the ear hears sounds, the mind is peaceful. The mind does not waver. Whatever we experience, the mind is not shaken. So where does this sort of tranquility come from? It comes from that other kind of tranquility, that unknowing samatha. That is a cause that enables it to come about. It is taught that wisdom comes from tranquility, knowing comes from unknowing, the mind comes to know from that state of unknowing, from learning to investigate, like this. There will be both tranquility and wisdom. Then, wherever we are, whatever we are doing, we see the truth of things. We know that the arising and ceasing experience in the mind is just like that. Then there is nothing more to do, nothing to correct or solve. There is no more speculation. There is nowhere to go, no escape. We can only escape through wisdom, through knowing things as they are and transcending them. So this is on the theme, sense objects and the mind. And this is a story from the Buddha's time, Tucho Putila. Was trying to teach Teacher Patilla was being taught, by a novice. So this is someone who was trying to understand the Dhamma, and he was teaching him and in a particular way, seeing if he had faith. And when he measured his faith and saw that he had faith, then he started teaching him this. This is from page 181, and this is called Tucho Patilla in the collected teachings. When Tucho Patilla had come out of the bog, the novice gave him the teaching. He taught him to observe the sense objects, to know the mind and to know the sense objects, using the simile of a man catching a lizard hiding in a termite mound. If the mound had 6 holes in it, how would he catch it? He would have to seal off 5 of the holes and leave just 1 open. Then he would have to simply watch and wait, guarding that 1 hole. When the lizard ran out, he could catch it. Observing the mind is like this. Closing off the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, we leave only the mind. To close off the senses means to restrain and compose them, observing only the mind. Meditation is like catching the lizard. We use sati to note the breath. Sati is the quality of recollection, as in asking yourself, what am I doing? Sampajanya is the awareness that now I am doing such and such. We observe the in and out breathing with sati and sampajanya. This quality of recollection is something that arises from practice. It's not something that can be learned from books. Know the feelings that arise. The mind may be fairly inactive for a while, and then a feeling arises. Sati works in conjunction with these feelings. Recollecting them, there is sati, the recollection that I will speak, I will go, I will sit, and so on. And then there is sampajanya, the awareness that now I am walking, I am lying down, I am experiencing such and such a mood. With sati and sampajanya, we can know our minds in the present moment, and we will know how the mind reacts to sense impressions. That which is aware of sense objects is called mind. Sense objects wander into the mind. For instance, there is a sound, like the electric drill here. It enters through the ear and travels inwards to the mind, which acknowledges that it is the sound of an electric drill. That which acknowledges the sound is called mind. Now this mind which acknowledges that sound is quite basic. It's just the average mind. Perhaps annoyance arises within the one who acknowledges. We must further train the one who acknowledges to become the one who knows, in accordance with the truth, known as Buddha. If we don't clearly know in accordance with the truth, then we get annoyed at sounds of people, cars, electric drills, and so on. This is just the ordinary untrained mind acknowledging the sound with annoyance. It knows in accordance with its preferences, not in accordance with the truth. We must further train it to know with vision and insight. Jnana dasana, that's knowledge and insight to the Four Noble Truths. The power of the refined mind, so that it knows the sound as simply sound. If we don't cling to sound, there is no annoyance. The sound arises and we simply note it. This is called truly knowing the arising of sense objects. If we develop the Buddho, clearly realizing the sound as sound, then it doesn't annoy us. It arises according to conditions. It is not a being, an individual, a self, an us or them. It's just sound. The mind lets go. This knowing is called Buddho, the knowledge that is clear and penetrating. With this knowledge, we can let the sound simply be sound. It doesn't disturb us unless we disturb it by thinking, I don't want to hear that sound, it's annoying. Suffering arises because of this thinking. Right here is the cause of suffering, that we don't know the truth of this matter. We haven't developed the Buddho. We are not yet clear, not yet awake, and we're also not yet aware. This is the raw, untrained mind. This mind is not yet truly useful to us. Therefore, the Buddha taught this mind must be trained and developed. We must develop the mind just like we develop the body, but we do it in a different way. To develop the body, we must exercise it, jogging in the morning and evening and so on. This is exercising the body. As a result, the body becomes more agile, stronger. The respiratory and nervous systems become more efficient. To exercise the mind, we don't have to move it around, but bring it to a halt, bring it to rest. For instance, when practicing meditation, we take an object such as the in and out breathing as our foundation, This becomes the focus of our attention and reflection. We look at the breathing. To look at the breathing means to follow the breathing with awareness, noting its rhythm, its coming and going. We put awareness into the breath, following the natural in and out breathing and letting go of all else. As a result of staying on one object of awareness, our mind becomes refreshed. If we let the mind think of this, that, and the other, there are many objects of awareness, the mind doesn't unify. It doesn't come to rest. To say the mind stops means that it feels as if it stopped. It doesn't go running here and there. It's like having a sharp knife. If we use the knife to cut at things indiscriminately, such as stones, bricks, and grass, our knife will quickly become blunt. We should use it for cutting only the things it was meant for. Our mind is the same. If we let the mind wander after thoughts and feelings which have no value or use, the mind becomes tired and weak. If the mind has no energy, wisdom will not arise, because the mind without energy is the mind without samadhi. If the mind hasn't stopped, you can't clearly see the sense objects for what they are. The knowledge that the mind is the mind, sense objects are merely sense objects, is the root from which Buddhism has grown and developed. This is the heart of Buddhism. We must cultivate this mind, develop it, training it in calm and insight. We train the mind to have restraint and wisdom by letting the mind stop and allowing wisdom to arise, by knowing the mind as it is. You know, the way we human beings are, the way we do things, we are just like little children. A child doesn't know anything. To an adult observing the behavior of a child, the way it plays and jumps around, its actions don't seem to have much purpose. If our mind is untrained, it is like a child. We speak without awareness and act without wisdom. We may fall to ruin or cause untold harm and not even know it. A child is ignorant. It plays as children do. Our ignorant mind is the same. So we should train this mind. The Buddha taught us to train the mind, to teach the mind. Even if we support Buddhism with the 4 requisites, our support is still superficial. It reaches only the bark or sapwood of the tree. The real support of Buddhism must be done through the practice, nowhere else, training our actions, speech, and thoughts according to the teachings. This is much more fruitful. If we are straight and honest, possessed of restraint and wisdom, our practice will bring prosperity. There will be no cause for spite and hostility. This is how our religion teaches us. So this is from chapter Knowing the World, and Ajahn Chah is just talking a little bit about practice, and he brings up doubt, knowing the mind. So again, this is sense objects in the mind. And again, page 343. My advice is not to let yourself get wrapped up in doubts and questions. Let them go and directly contemplate whatever you are experiencing. Don't make a big deal out of any physical pleasure or pain you experience. When you sit in meditation and start to feel tired or uncomfortable, adjust your position, endure as much as you can, and then move. Don't overdo it. Develop a lot of mindfulness. That's the point. Do your walking and sitting meditation as much as you can. The aim is to be developing mindfulness as much as you can, knowing things fully. That's enough. Please take my words to contemplate. Whatever form of practice you're doing, when objects of mind arise, whether internally or externally, those are called aroma. The one who is aware of the aroma is called, well, whatever you want to call it is okay. You can call it mind. The aroma is one thing, and the one who knows the aroma is another. It's like the eye and the objects it sees. The eye isn't the objects, and the objects aren't the eye. The ear hears sounds, but the ear isn't the sound, and the sound isn't the ear. When there is contact between the two, then things happen. All states of mind, happy or unhappy, are called aroma. Whatever they may be, Never mind. We should constantly be reminding ourselves that this is uncertain. People don't consider very much that this is uncertain. Just this is the vital factor that will bring about wisdom. It's really important. In order to cease our coming and going and come to rest, we only need to say, this is uncertain. Sometimes we may be distraught over something to the point that tears are flowing. This is something not certain. When moods of desire or aversion come to us, we should just remind ourselves of this one thing. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, whatever appears is uncertain. Can't you do this? Keep it up no matter what happens. Give it a try. You don't need a lot. Just this will work. This is something that brings wisdom. The way I practice meditation is not very complicated. Just this. This is what it all comes down to. It's uncertain. Everything meets at this point. Don't keep track of the various instances of mental experience. When you sit, there may be various conditions of mind appearing, seeing, and knowing all manner of things, experiencing different states. Don't be keeping track of them. Literally, don't count them. And don't get wrapped up in them. You only need to remind yourself that they're uncertain. That's enough. That's easy to do. It's simple. Then you can stop. Knowledge will come, but then don't make too much out of that or get attached to it. Real investigation in the correct way, doesn't involve thinking. As soon as something contacts the eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body, it immediately takes a place of its own. You don't have to pick up anything to look at. Things just present themselves and investigation happens of its own. We talk about vitaka, initial thought. It means raising something up. Vichara is discursive thought. It's investigation, seeing the planes of existence, bhumi, that appear. In the final analysis, the way of the Buddha flourishes through impermanence. It is always timely and relevant, whether in the time of the Buddha, in other times past, in the present age, or in the future. At all times, it is impermanence that rules. This is something you should meditate on. So this is from a chapter called Clarity of Insight, and it's sort of it seems like an instruction that Ajahn Chah is giving according to his own experience in sort of a what I surmise is like almost like an advanced practice. So he's really kind of talking about how to deal with the mind after one's been really kind of working with it and seeing it for many, many years, and what this might might be like. So this is some words on that, and it deals with the sense bases. So this is starting at page 409. Seeing the way the body truly is, clearly and beyond doubt from within the calm of samadhi, leads to the mind experiencing a strong sense of weariness and turning away, nibbida. This turning away comes from the sense of disenchantment and dispassion that arises as the natural result of seeing the way things are. It's not a turning away that comes from ordinary worldly moods such as fear, revulsion, or other unwholesome qualities like envy or aversion. It's not coming from the same root of attachment as those defiled mental states. This is turning away that has a spiritual quality to it and has a different effect on the mind from that of the normal moods of boredom and weariness experienced by ordinary unenlightened human beings, putujana. Usually when ordinary unenlightened human beings are weary and fed up, they get caught into moods of aversion, rejection, and seeking to avoid. The experience of insight is not the same. The sense of world weariness that grows with insight, however, leads to detachment, turning away, and aloofness that comes naturally from investigating and seeing the truth of the way things are. It is free from attachment to a sense of self that attempts to control and force things to go according to its desires. Rather, you let go with an acceptance of the way things are. The clarity of insight is so strong that you no longer experience any sense of a self that has to struggle against the flow of its desires or endure through attachment. The three fetters of personality view, doubt, and blind attachment to rules and practices that are normally present underlying the way you view the world can't delude you or cause you to make any serious mistakes in practice. This is the very beginning of the path, the first clear insight into ultimate truth, and paves the way for further insight. You could describe it as penetrating the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are things to be realized through insight. Every monk and nun who has ever realized them has experienced such insight into the truth of the way things are. You know suffering, you know the cause of suffering, you know the cessation of suffering, and you know the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Understanding of each noble truth emerges at the same place within the mind. They come together and harmonize as the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, and the Buddha taught that they are to be realized within the mind. As the path factors converge in the center of the mind, they cut through any doubts and uncertainty you still have concerning the way of practice. During the course of practicing, it is normal that you experience the different conditions of the mind. You constantly experience desires to do this and that, or go to different places, as well as the different moods of mental pain, frustration, or else indulgence in pleasure-seeking, all of which are the fruits of past karma. All this resultant karma swells up inside the mind and puffs it out. However, it is the product of past actions. Knowing that it is all stuff coming up from the past, you don't allow yourself to make anything new or extra out of it. You observe and reflect on the arising and cessation of conditions. That which has not yet arisen is still unarisen. This word arise refers to upadana, or the mind's firm attachment and clinging. Over time, your mind has been exposed to and conditioned by craving and defilement, and the mental conditions and characteristics you experience reflect that. Having developed insight, your mind no longer follows these old habit patterns that were fashioned by defilement. A separation occurs between the mind and those defiled ways of thinking and reacting. The mind separates from the defilements. You can compare this with the effect of putting oil and water together in a bottle. Each liquid has a very different density, so it doesn't matter whether you keep them in the same bottle or in separate ones, because difference in their density prevents the liquids from mixing together or permeating into each other. The oil doesn't mix with the water and vice versa. They remain in separate parts of the bottle. You can compare the bottle with the world and these two different liquids in the bottle that have been put there. You can compare the bottle with the world, and these two different liquids in the bottle that have been put there are forced to stay within its confines and are similar to you living in the world with insight that separates your mind from the defilements. You can say that you are living in the world and following the conventions of the world, but without attaching to it. When you have to go somewhere, you say you are going. When you are coming, you say you are coming. Or whatever you are doing, you use the conventions and language of the world. But it's like the two liquids in the bottle. They are in the same bottle but don't mix together. You live in the world, but at the same time you remain separate from it. The Buddha knew the truth for himself. He was the Lokavidu, the knower of the world. What are the sense bases, ayatana? They consist of the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The ears hear sound, and the nose performs the function of smelling different smells, whether fragrant or pungent. The tongue has the function of tasting tastes, whether sweet, sour, rich, or salty. The body senses heat and cold, softness and hardness. The mind receives mind objects, which arise in the same way as they always have. The sense bases function as they did before. You experience sensory impingement in just the same way as you always have. It's not true that after the experience of insight, your nose no longer experiences any smells, or your tongue that formerly was able to taste can no longer taste anything, or the body is unable to feel anything anymore. Your ability to experience the world through the senses remains intact. Just the same as before, you started practicing insight. But the mind's reaction to sense impingement is to see it as just that much. The mind doesn't attach to fixed perceptions or make anything out of the experience of sense objects. It lets go. The mind knows that it is letting go. As you gain insight into the true nature of the Dhamma, it naturally results in letting go. There is awareness followed by abandoning of attachment. There is understanding and then letting go. With insight, you set things down. Insight knowledge doesn't lead to clinging or attachment. It doesn't increase your suffering. That's not what happens. True insight into the Dhamma results in letting go. You know that attachment is the cause of suffering, so you abandon it. Once you have insight into the mind, it lets go. It puts down what it was formerly holding on to. Another way to describe this is to say that you are no longer fumbling or groping around in your practice. You are no longer blindly groping and attaching to forms, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, or mind objects. The experience of sense objects through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind no longer stimulates the same old habitual movements of mind, where it is seeking to get involved with such sense objects or adding on to the experience through further proliferation. The mind doesn't create things around sense contact. Once contact has occurred, you automatically let go. The mind discards the experience. This means that if you are attracted to something, you experience the attraction in the mind, but you don't attach or hold on fast to it. If you have a reaction of aversion, there is simply the experience of aversion arising in the mind and nothing more. There isn't any sense of self arising that attaches and gives meaning and importance to the aversion. In other words, the mind knows how to let go. It knows how to set things aside. Why is it able to let go and put things down? Because the presence of insight means you can see the harmful results that come from attaching to all those mental states. When you see forms, the mind remains undisturbed. When you hear sounds, it remains undisturbed. The mind doesn't take a position for or against any sense objects experienced. This is the same for all sense contact, whether it is through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind. Whatever thoughts arise in the mind can't disturb you. You are able to let go. You may perceive something as desirable, but you don't attach to that perception or give it any special importance. It simply becomes a condition of mind to be observed without attachment. This is what the Buddha described as experiencing sense objects as just that much. The sense bases are still functioning and experiencing sense objects, but without the process of attachment stimulating movements to and fro in the mind. There is no conditioning of the mind occurring in the sense of a self moving from this place to that place or from that place moving to this place. Sense contact occurs between the 6 sense bases as normal, but the mind doesn't take sides by getting caught in conditions of attraction or aversion. You understand how to let go. There is awareness of sense contact followed by letting go. You let go with awareness and sustain the awareness after you have to let go. This is how the process of insight works. Every angle and every aspect of the mind and its experience naturally becomes part of the practice. This is the way the mind is affected as you train it. It becomes very obvious that the mind has changed and is not the same as usual. It no longer behaves in the way you are accustomed to. You are no longer creating a self out of your experience. For example, when you experience the death of your mother, father, or anyone else who is close to you, if your mind remains firm in the practice of calm and insight and is able to reflect skillfully on what has happened, you won't create suffering for yourself out of the event. Rather than panicking or feeling shocked at the news of that person's death, there is just a sense of sadness and dispassion coming from wise reflection. You are aware of the experience and then let go. There is the knowing, and then you lay it aside. You let go without generating any further suffering for yourself. This is because you know clearly what causes suffering to arise. When you do encounter suffering, you are aware of that suffering. As soon as you start to experience suffering, you automatically ask yourself the question, where does it come from? Suffering has its cause, and that is the attachment and clinging still left in the mind. So you have to let go of the attachment. All suffering comes from a cause. Having created the cause, you abandon it. Abandon it with wisdom. You let go of it through insight, which means wisdom. You can't let go through delusion. This is the way it is. The investigation and development of insight into the Dhamma gives rise to this profound peace of mind. When you have gained such clear and penetrating insight, it is sustained at all times, whether you are sitting meditation with your eyes closed, or even if you are doing something with your eyes open. Whatever situation you find yourself in, be it in formal meditation or not, the clarity of insight remains. When you have unwavering mindfulness of the mind within the mind, you don't forget yourself. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, the awareness within makes it impossible to lose mindfulness. It's a state of awareness that prevents you forgetting yourself. Mindfulness has become so strong that it is self-sustaining to the point where it becomes natural for the mind to be that way. These are the results of training and cultivating the mind, and it is here where you go beyond doubt. You have no doubts about the future, you have no doubts about the past, and accordingly have no need to doubt about the present either. You still have awareness that there is such a thing as past, present, and future. You are aware of the existence of time. There is the reality of the past, present, and future, but you are no longer concerned or worried about it. Why are you no longer concerned? All those things that took place in the past have already happened. The past has already passed by. All that is arising in the present is the result of causes that lay in the past. An obvious example of this is to say that if you don't feel hungry now, it's because you have already eaten at some time in the past. The lack of hunger in the present is the result of actions performed in the past. If you know your experience in the present, you can know the past. Eating a meal was the cause from the past that resulted in you feeling at ease or energetic in the present, and this provides the cause for you to be active and work in the future. So the present is providing causes that will bring results in the future. The past, present, and future can thus be seen as one and the same. The Buddha called it Eko Dhammo, the unity of the Dhamma. It isn't many different things. There's just this much. When you see the present, you see the future. By understanding the present, you understand the past. Past, present, and future make up a chain of continuous cause and effect, and hence are constantly flowing on from one to the other. There are causes from the past that produce results in the present, and these are already producing causes for the future. This process of cause and result applies to practice in the same way. You experience the fruits of having trained the mind in samadhi and insight, and these necessarily make the mind wiser and more skillful. The mind completely transcends doubt. You are no longer uncertain or speculating about anything. The lack of doubt means you no longer fumble around or have to feel your way through the practice. As a result, you live and act in accordance with nature. You live in the world in the most natural way. That means living in the world peacefully. You are able to find peace even in the midst of that which is unpeaceful. You are fully able to live in the world. You are able to live in the world without creating any problems. The Buddha lived in the world and was able to find true peace of mind within the world. As practitioners of the Dhamma, you must learn to do the same. Don't get lost in and attached to perceptions about things being this way or that way. Don't attach or give undue importance to any perceptions that are still deluded. Whenever the mind becomes stirred up, investigate and contemplate the cause. When you aren't making any suffering for yourself out of things, you are at ease. When there are no issues causing mental agitation, you remain equanimous. That is, you continue to practice normally with a mental equanimity maintained by the presence of mindfulness and an all-round awareness. You keep a sense of self-control and equilibrium. If any matter arises and prevails upon the mind, you immediately take hold of it for thorough investigation and contemplation. If there is clear insight at that moment, you penetrate the matter with wisdom and prevent it creating any suffering in the mind. If there is not yet clear insight, you let the matter go temporarily through the practice of samatha meditation, and don't allow the mind to attach. At some point in the future, your insight will certainly be strong enough to penetrate it, because sooner or later you will develop insight powerful enough to comprehend everything that still causes attachment and suffering. I'm just skipping a paragraph here to end it. Here you examine the mind with firm and unwavering attention. As you experience different objects through the senses, you don't let it feed mental proliferation. You don't get caught in a lot of defiled thinking. You are already practicing vipassana and depending on insight wisdom to investigate all sense objects. The mode of vipassana meditation is what develops wisdom. Training with the different objects of samatha meditation, whether it is a recitation of a word such as Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho, or the practice of mindfulness with the breathing, results in the mind experiencing the calm and firmness of samadhi. In samatha meditation, you focus awareness on a single object and let go of all others temporarily. Vipassana meditation is similar because you use the reflection, don't believe it, as you make contact with sense objects. Practicing vipassana, you don't let any sense object delude you. You're aware of each object as soon as it converges in on the mind. Whether it is experienced with the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind, and you use this reflection, don't believe it, almost like a verbal meditation object to be repeated over and over again. Every object immediately becomes a source of insight. You use the mind that is firm in samadhi to investigate each object's impermanent nature. At each moment of sense contact, you bring up the reflection, it's not certain, or this is impermanent. If you are caught in delusion and believe in the object experienced, you suffer, because all these dhammas, phenomena, are not self. If you attach to anything that is non-self and misperceive it as self, it automatically becomes a cause for pain and distress. This is because you attach to mistaken perceptions. Let's stop there.
Really appreciate Porter's way of talking about the practice without touching on attaining sotapanna, satakama.
Yeah, that whole last talk was all about sotapanna.
Yeah, but he didn't say sotapanna one time.
Didn't say anything about it. That was his whole, just the language that he used is pointing to the three fetters. Because there was some idiom that he used about groping or grasping, and that's the Thai translation for Siddhapata Paramasa is like grasping and groping after writing precept of practice. Lukram. So that, and the same with the whole sense of self and the freedom from doubt. So it's pointing to realities, getting the conceiving mind in a way. It's encouragement to do practice.
I think, in recalling it, it's hard to remember through when you're reading it, but he wasn't saying I'm doing this and I did this, and it was a lot of like, this is what happens when you practice this way.
Yes, well that's actually, one, it's certainly a way he speaks, but it's also part of the construct of the Thai language. You just don't need to have personal pronouns. Very rare. It's just unheard of in kind of English language. It's also why they have different. Even somebody who's lived in America for quite some time, often brings up he and she.
I just find it helpful that he's describing stream entry and really this form of advanced practice, so that because it's not like you don't want to talk about it at all, and it's obvious that he's talking about it from his own experience by how he's talking so in depth from the mind.
Yes.
But it's like I think it's not helpful when it's just like, oh no, I don't want to talk about this at all because I don't want anybody to think it might be about me and
which is all about me.
Yeah, exactly. So then it allows people who just want to know, and also have an aspiration, or might be working with possibly the same thing, like what to do.
Absolutely.
the
Yeah, and
Dhamma.
it makes it very, very tangible and real.
And also gives a lot of faith.
Yeah.
You know. Okay, well, it's 10:30, so we can wrap things up.